The three forms of taking in information.
So audio, kinesthetic,
Visual.
Visual. So kinesthetic, audio, and then visual, right? So if you take all those three different aspects into it and you apply those within that interaction, you're going to get a lot more reciprocation, a lot more understanding of what it is that you're doing, right? So ultimately, there's a verbiage that I use. Telling is not selling, right? So if you're telling a person something and you're telling them there's something wrong with them, that's one thing. But if you basically bring it up in such a way where they tell you that there's something wrong with them, that's a completely different situation, right? So in that example, a lot of these movements are going to be emphasizing on how to teach the proper deadlift hinging pattern, so that way you're actually earning the lift. So when I say earning the lift, what do I mean by that? Earning it, like earning the lift.
Earning the mode, the weight.
like you're, I guess, getting full range of motion in the movement pattern. So you're not compensating, you're actually using it.
Yeah, so understanding how the hips should be moving, right? So a good one to kind of use to just focus on just the hips themselves is if you take a band and you wrap it around just the front portion of the hips here, right? So when I step forward into past away from the band where the band is at, right? There's tension going what direction? The band. Back, right? So the band's actually pulling my body weight or my hips back in that direction, right? If I put it up here, it's pulling more towards my belly button. So I want to put it right where the crease of the hips is going to be at, because that's where the hinge is going to be taking place at, right? So if I put my hands on my thighs here, I'm going to think about basically mirroring my thighs with my palms, right? So as far as the hinge pattern is concerned, what am I looking for as a trainer as far as proper deadlift execution? Am I looking for knees going forward? Am I looking for east and west? What am I looking for?
So for your slide in the knees,
Side of the knees.
and you're looking for that. So as you drive your hips back, you're looking for a neutral spine.
Neutral spine, right?
Up until that neutral spine breaks, then that's your
Okay. So somebody cue me on this. Let me know if I'm doing this wrong. Okay.
yeah.
What am I doing wrong? Down your back. Activate here. Forearm.
His neck. His neck.
So how do I activate my core? Elbow to the side. Okay. Alright, what about lower body? Is that looking good too? Is this another
You're squatting a little too much. So
We're gonna do more of a squat, right?
bring your hips back.
Your knees are bending.
Okay. So let's take that back a notch, right? So if I was to go into this, I need to understand what should be a proper hinge first and foremost, right? So if I want to focus on this, great. I can work on getting the hips going, but if I don't know what bringing my shoulders to my back pocket or opening of the chest or engaging the core is, it's tough for me to compartmentalize that or understand it, right? So if I take one of these other bands here, I'm going to go in such a way where it's going to be a different learning point. So it's still a hinging pattern, but now I'm going to focus on the cue point that you were focusing on a second ago, which was what? The very first cue that you put out.
Shoulders down.
Shoulders back, right? So little crucial way of thinking about this, right? A deadlift. So when you're doing a proper deadlift, before you even actually do the lift itself, you gotta be able to bring those shoulder blades back towards your back pocket and then squeeze those armpits down to the inside, right? So if I'm squeezing the armpits in and then bringing the shoulders to the back pocket, I'm creating plenty of shoulder integrity or engagement prior to actually pulling itself, right? So where I tend to see most of the issues take place on a deadlift is when people start pulling, they start yanking weight around. So if I pull, automatically I can have a good position, but as soon as I start lifting that weight up, I yank up and then the shoulders fall forward, right? And that makes a squint, right? What's going on when that happens? No shoulder integrity. So let's take a step back. If I grab these bands here, right? What I'm going to focus on is I'm going to take a breath in, and I'm going to exhale as I drive my hips back. Okay. So I may start the person out by saying, okay, what I want you to do is as you come down towards your toes, I want you to think about mirroring your thighs with your palms. And as you're going back into driving the hips back, I want you to think about bringing your shoulder blades towards your back pocket as you start moving forward, right? So think of it like this. As soon as you start going to that movement pattern, I want you to think about bringing these to the back pocket. So bring the shoulders back, okay? I want you to think about squeezing a pair of oranges. So got 2 pairs of oranges in between your armpits. Once you squeeze those, then once you start thinking about bringing the shoulders towards your back pocket, as soon as you start driving the hips back. Does that make sense? So as soon as you start driving the hips back, mirror the palms up against your thighs, and the further you go down, the more you're bringing these shoulders to the back pocket as you go through that motion. Okay? Now from here, I want you to come back up again. Take a breath in, keep your chin towards your spine here, okay? So when I say keep your chin towards your spine, slightly tuck your chin in a little bit, and then pull your chin back towards your spine here, okay? Now, squeeze the oranges, mirror the thighs, you drive the hips back, and then bring those shoulders towards the back pocket as you come through. Drive back, keep on driving back. There it is, good, okay? And then clinch up top, okay? So maybe I'll just start out with something like that, where I have them understand and compartmentalize what I'm referring to when I'm saying go into an hinging pattern, okay? So taking that same cue system, I want you to drive the hips back, find that deadlift pattern. So let's say I've already focused on creating a nice vertical shin position. I want to have a nice vertical shin position because that lets you know that you're established in a proper hinge pattern, right? If you're driving the hips back. Now, depending on the person and their levers, they may have a little bit more of a knee bend to pull the band all the way back towards my back pockets.
Get out of here.
Right?
Oh,
so when I pull this back towards my back pockets, I'm going to think about squeezing oranges in between my armpits, right? Back pocket with the shoulder blades, and I'm going to maintain that position. So as I hold this position here, I'm going to focus on really keeping that integrity aspect or the discipline of a proper deadlift pattern. Make sense? So maybe I'll do an isometrical. From here, it's going to be basically about 5 breaths. Take 5 breaths, come up, keep that engagement as you come up, and then decelerate slowly as you go through that motion. Okay? So grab the band here. So take a breath in, stand up tall first. Stand up tall first. So I'm going to get accustomed to basically coaching my person to clenching the glutes every single time they're on top. Why is that?
I'll just keep everything engaged.
So a deadlift is a shearing force, right? More often than not, you're going to see people actually stop right about here before they're at the full extension of a deadlift or even a squat, so to speak, right? So I don't want him to overdrive up, but I want to make sure that he's able to clench the glutes, because when he clenches the glutes, he's establishing a neutral spine from that position here, as opposed to stopping halfway through, bring the hips back a little bit, halfway through, and still having a little bit of a subtle shearing force at the spine, at the lower back area, right? When he comes into the top, he's able to clench the glutes. That's how he's going to know that that's his marker or baseline of starting and ending point of the movement pattern, right? So right off the bat, I want to make sure that I'm already priming him for what my expectations are when he's under load. So when I'm referring to earning the lift itself, I'm referring to the fact that I want you to fully understand everything, my checklist of the things that I want him to understand prior to going into the lift itself, right? So from here, I want you to keep your eyes forward here, tuck your chin in, just like we did a second ago. Now what I want you to do is I want you to drive the hips back into the deadlift pattern that we did a second ago. Back, 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 back. Now close out the ribcage a little bit, good. All the way to the shins are vertical, so keep on driving back, perfect. Now from here, break the handle outward, so literally do this here, right? Now from here, I want you to keep that nice engaged position and then pull towards your pockets, all the way back. And here, I want you to maintain this position, squeeze the oranges that are in between your armpits, bring the shoulders towards your back pocket, maintain this position here the whole time, and I want you to hold this here while you're breathing. So take a few breaths in here. Keep that engagement, keep those shoulder blades back. Good. 2, 1. Now stand up first, keep that engagement first, clench the glutes, and then decelerate slowly into that motion there. Good, all while keeping this nice and braced. So before you even go into this motion for this next one here, I want you to make sure that you take a breath in, stand up tall, take a breath in, and then brace, as you exhale. Get that clinched, okay? Take a small breath in through your nose while you're still keeping that integrity here, and then drive the hips back. Drive the hips back first, establish that hinging pattern. So what we're doing here is by having him take that breath in up top, he's solidifying a proper core engagement. So that way what doesn't happen? Overarching, right? I don't want overarching to take place. From here, pull towards the back pocket, shoulders to the back pockets, squeeze those oranges from that position there. Keep your chin towards your spine, keep that discipline. Think about the weight being from here to the heel, okay? So shift it mostly here, about 60% of the weight's gonna be here, about 40% here, okay? And a little bit here. Keep that engagement, and then come back up. Clench first, and then decelerate slowly. Got that? So a couple different parameters on that, right? So now he understands what I mean when I'm talking about going into a proper deadlift pattern. As soon as I go into the actual lift itself, right? Let's say I've actually loaded here. I'm actually going into the lift itself. Let's say I've actually talked about engaging by breaking the bar. So when I'm holding onto the bar, I'm not holding onto a neutrally. What am I doing? I'm thinking about breaking the bar, right? So if I'm thinking about breaking the bar, what am I capitalizing on? Engaging my lats, right? So let me give you guys an analogy. When it comes to engaging your lats, think of the towel being all the ligaments and tendons, the muscular tissue that surrounds the shoulder in its own, and think about like my forearm being the humerus, right? And then there's a ball and socket joint for the shoulder itself, right? So when the ball and socket joint sits into what section? Where does it sit into? The shoulder capsule. What's this socket called?
I don't know. I forgot.
Yeah, so the glenohumeral joint, right? It's
There
gonna
we
sit
go.
in there, right?
But not the clavicle.
So it's gonna sit in there, right? So once it sits in there, that's where it's moving around, right? So when it's sitting in there, yes, that's just the shoulder joint sitting in there, right? But then you have all the tissue that surrounds it, right? So tissue meaning ligaments, tendons, everything else that surrounds it. If I let the arm move around, it's called circumduction, right? Moving the arm around. It has the ability to do all this. So does your hip. But your hip has a lot more tissue to work with, so it doesn't have as much range of motion as, for example, the shoulder does, right? So if I have the shoulder set up here, by creating that twisting action, yes, I'm engaging the lat, but I'm creating plenty of shoulder integrity by twisting and breaking that bar. So when I'm referring to shoulder integrity, I'm meaning proper engagement prior to going to the movement pattern, right? So once again, even this portion here, let's say I'm even doing rack, accelerating my body weight down into the deadlift pattern, I'm already thinking of shoulder blades to the back pocket. So locked in, shoulder blades towards the back pocket as I'm going through. So literally, as I'm going down, I'm forcing my shoulder blades back as soon as I start moving back. As opposed to if I just relax as I'm going to a deadlift pattern. See the difference? Very little emphasis on proper position here, right? So locked in, breaking the bar, decelerate, keep the chin towards the spine as I go down towards that deadlift pattern. Okay? So taking that into account, right? If I go into my setup, up and over here, let's have you put this around your hips. And I want you to face the wall here.
So would you use the quick band first?
What's that?
In terms of progression, would you use the quick band or to the right?
I prefer to use the cook band just to set the standard, just to set the stage, okay? Because what the cook band does, what did you notice when you did the cook band?
Everything. Keep my shoulders down and back, my hips, just keep all my legs and all.
Yeah. You were setting the checklist, right? So what I'm doing, what I'm presenting here is I'm emphasizing on creating a checklist as to what I want my person to do or think about in their minds when they're performing the actual deadlift itself. So when I showed you with the bar here, right? It's the exact same thing as you did a second ago with the handles pulled back, right? So when I'm pulling the handles back here, I'm literally basically mirroring the ending point of where I would be with the actual bar itself, right? So where people tend to misconstrue the actual deadlift itself is like there's only certain sections of work that take place in the deadlift. The work starts as soon as you touch the bar. So when you touch the bar, you have to be very aware of your body position, your engagement, global tension, if you will, right? What do I mean when I say global tension, guys? Global tension, as far as your body.
Like your core is tight, your lats are engaged, like your glutes, everything's engaged.
Everything's dialed in, right? Core's tight, lats are engaged. I'm thinking about the proper position. A plank, if I'm doing a proper plank, am I doing a just engagement in the upper body, or am I engaging everything for a proper plank via the stuff that we've talked about, right? Now, in a sense, a lot of the stuff that I'm referring to incorporates lifting, squats, deadlifts, kettlebell swing, you know? Kettlebell swing can be a little bit more of a dynamic type of a movement pattern, but at a certain point within the kettlebell swing, you need to have global tension, right? Maybe in the beginning of the lift, before you start actually swinging the weight. Before you do the actual kettlebell swing, when you're here, you're engaging, and then from there, you're hiking back, right? So before you even start the kettlebell swing, by hiking the weight back and then coming through to the kettlebell swing in its own, that initial hike point, you should have global tension, you should have proper deadlift position to execute the movement for proper movement pattern, right? So when you do that, you're engaging everything, and this just for like a split second. But at the same time, you're making yourself safe when you do that. As opposed to if you do it in a very like Limp Bizkit type of approach, you're gonna have a very weak torso. You're gonna be falling down, right? You're not gonna be. You're thinking the band, right? What the heck? All right, so my man James will be hopping forward here, right? So right off the bat, he's gonna want to go into a position where it is normal for him. I want to basically challenge him to have his toes forward, okay? And the reason why I want to challenge him into having his toes forward is because I want even distribution to both hamstrings, right? There's an outer part of the hamstring and there's an inner part of the hamstrings. Now, if he's not able to do a full reach of this movement pattern, that's okay. That just lets us know that he needs more areas of opportunity to be executed at a hamstring flexibility level, because he can only do a hinge with feet like this, right? But as opposed to this, you have even distribution on both ends. Does that make sense? So I want his hands to be on his thighs, just like we practiced a second ago. And right off the bat, James, I want you to keep your chin towards your spine here. I want you to keep those shoulders back. As soon as you start allowing that band to assist you in that hinge pattern, I want you to think about pulling these shoulders towards the back pocket. So if you guys imagine a line here, like a little arrow pulling down, as I'm pulling the little arrow down, those shoulders should be pulling back as it's going into the hinge itself, right? So taking a breath in, I want you to drive the hips back. As you pull those shoulders towards the back pocket, I want you to start squeezing these oranges as you're going through. Squeezing the oranges. Good. His eyes are going to be somewhere around here. And right around where his hands are around kneecap level or below his kneecap level, that's going to be around his end range of motion. For the most part, okay? Now come back up. You're going to clench up top, okay? Squeeze the glutes, right? Take a breath in. I want you to brace first. Keep this nice and dialed in. There's still going to be a little bit of an arch, but what that's going to do is it's going to make it a point to keep the core engaged prior to going to the hinge itself, right? So send the pillars down first. So drive the hips back. Reach through the toes, but bring the shoulder blades towards the back pocket. It's very counterintuitive because his natural movement pattern that he wants to fall into is bringing the shoulders forward. So the active forces that he's thinking about is shoulder integrity, shoulder engagement prior to going to the movement pattern itself as he goes into the movement pattern. Come back up. Hinge up top. Good. Repeat that again. And then pull these shoulders back. Pull these shoulders back. Now drive the hips back. And I want him to visualize most of the weight being from here back. Okay? Toes are still in contact on the ground. Don't misconstrue that there. He's focusing on keeping most of the weight here, some of it here. Okay? Go. Perfect. Good. So same exact movement pattern as we did up here. The only difference is that now we're focusing on varying our focus on the hips, right? But because we did a preliminary approach where I preset the expectations with the cook band, now he understands exactly what I mean when I say bring the shoulder blades towards the back pocket, squeeze the oranges. See what I'm saying? And like a lot of times we think of a rack row as just like a pulling pattern or just like a rowing movement, right? But if you really start digesting the movement a little bit differently, you start thinking more in a 3D fashion, right? So the more you start thinking in a 3D fashion, the better you are able to articulate the way movements are, and the more you can connect the ideas and quote unquote the ideologies with the actual movement patterns in its own, right? So we just took the cook bands. Pull this thing out. So we just took the cook bands, the standard just resistant band, to just create the same mindset here, right? Just understanding the movement pattern. Now, let's add a little bit of an extra stress to it. So the stress in this is going to be a band pulling me away from the actual bar itself, right? I'm not going to use an actual weighted bar. I'm going to use just one of these little guys here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit up right in the center of the bar itself. Now, from this position here, I'm going to step back, right? So as far as foot positioning, it depends on the person's flexibility, okay? If the person's hamstring flexibility is not up to par, you're probably going to end up veering more towards a sumo deadlift as opposed to a conventional deadlift, right? Or you may actually decrease the distance of where the deadlift is coming from. And what do I mean by decreasing the distance when I say that?
Raise the bar.
Bring in risers, right? So if you bring risers, then you don't have to cut off the deadlift altogether or the hinging pattern. You can just start implementing that movement at a less of a depth approach.
And that's just from the flexibility.
That's the flexibility standpoint. Mm-hmm. So if I'm looking at a person and everything's great, it looks dandy, they're plenty engaged, and they're finding the hamstrings and driving back, and as soon as they hit a certain point, shoulders start falling forward, or they start veering more forward, or something just goes off, it could be a hamstring flexibility issue. Okay? It could be a lack of understanding of the position, but at the same time, it's like it's always better to be safe than sorry. All right. So as far as this movement pattern is concerned, what I'm doing here is now you can see the band is actually pulling me away from my midline, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the bar. By breaking the bar, what am I doing? Engaging the shoulder capsule, right? I'm going to pull back, and then right off the bat, I'm going to keep it in alignment with my torso. So now those are engaged, right? So by doing this, I'm just engaging all the tissue surrounding the shoulder itself. By pulling back, now I'm adding the extensions into the picture, right? The retractors, right? So now I'm retracting back. Both toes are facing forward. I'm going to stick to the same game plan, the same checklist, which is, what are some cues that I gave you guys a second ago?
Next, head straight, back towards the spine.
So chin towards my spine, squeezing the oranges, shoulder blades to the back pocket. So why is shoulder blades to the back pocket so powerful, guys?
So your shoulders are round forward.
I'm literally visualizing an arrow going back towards my back pocket. Okay? So it's a visualistic approach, right? So breaking the bar, squeezing the oranges, keeping it nice and snug up against my torso. I'm gonna drive the hips back. Right off the bat, I'm gonna think about those shoulders towards the back pocket as I'm going lower and lower and lower, all while maintaining the nice integrity aspect. From here, driving the ground away, it's a leg press, and then driving the hips forward. Pinching the quads or the glutes into the picture, keeping this engaged. If I'm doing this right, this is fatiguing in its own right. Okay? So take a breath, corkscrew, pull, shoulders to the back pocket, maintain that, chin towards the spine, drive the hips back, 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 back. And if you visualize this, there's back pocket taking place, there's oranges taking place. I'm trying to get myself some orange juice in the morning, baby. Okay? So, hop on over here. So I got my man Little Hulk over here popping up, right? So it looks easy when you look at it, but there's a lot of things going on because I'm having to basically compartmentalize all of that, right? So break the bar, corkscrew, okay? Pull it towards your thighs, nice and snug. Eyes forward right off the bat. As soon as he starts going down to the deadlift pattern, he's gonna wanna do this because it feels easy, right? I want you to keep your eyes here the whole time, okay? So start driving the hips back. Keep this touching your body the whole time. Back, start bending the knees a little bit. Good. Back, 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 back. Keep that engagement, good. Come back up. Clench the quads and the glutes up top, good. Good, readjust, relax for a second, okay? So here's the thing, when I have you rest at the bottom, I want you to focus on taking small breaths, all while keeping all this engaged, okay? When you're at the bottom, I'm gonna have you pause for 5 seconds, okay? So engage, break the bar first, good. Pull it back nice and snug up against your thighs. I want it to be physically being pulled back up against your thighs. Nice and tight, as much as you can. And when he does that, there's retraction taking place here. I want to maintain that. Now drive the hips back. Back, 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 back pocket, oranges, good. Keep it going, and then pause here. Keep that engagement. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Drive up, finish. There you go, good. Relax for a second, go back into it. I'm gonna have you hold it for 10 seconds this time, okay? Here we go. Chin towards the spine, break the bar, pull it nice and snug, keep it tight, even tighter than you need to, good. Keep that position and then decelerate, 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 decelerate. Think about that. Why am I saying decelerate? Why am I saying decelerate on this, guys? Keep that engagement. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, good. Come on up, clinch. Nice. Talk to me. PRs, baby. Yes. Before you go into your feedback loop, what did you guys notice on this? I think you guys to execute this right off the bat? No. Do I want you guys to do it if you start practicing this shit? Yes. There's a big difference, right? Do I expect you guys to do this right off the bat? No, right? But understanding the process behind it. I'm never going to go into telling you guys something without telling you why. There's always a purpose behind something that I say, something that I do, and something that I ask of you. And I'm not going to ask you to do something if I haven't felt it myself, right? So let's take this other example here. Let's take the exact same exercise, but add a different variable to it. A kettlebell, right? So right now the variable that we have here is just understanding what a bar should feel like when you're creating tension, right? Let's say for example, we took the same variable and added a deadlift pattern to it. Actually, it's all a deadlift pattern, sorry. Let's say we added an actual loaded bar with a 25-pound weight on each side, right? Same exact thing, but now I'm actually doing an actual static deadlift position, pre-engaging, global tension, everything's dialed in. From here, I'm gonna drive up as I'm going through. It's a natural deadlift, but now I have a little extra caveat. The little band's pulling out that way. If the band's pulling out that way, now I'm at an extra force, along with the shearing force that gravity is creating up against my spine. I have to abduct. I need to pull this back into my body. I need to create the retraction factor, right? So let's take a more of a dialed down / watered down version of that. Adding a kettlebell into it, right? So what I like about this is that with the kettlebell, you have no option but to really properly execute the position. You don't have a lot of weight, but the way the handle is set up, it allows you to dial in a little bit more. Okay. Now here's the thing: if you take a weight, right, and you do like a lateral raise, right? If you do a lateral raise, this is out of your center mass. This is really challenging, right? The only thing about this is that with this, you're focusing on the smaller muscle groups that aren't really part of the shoulder capsule that you're trying to develop. If I take the same movement, but I create a different mechanical position, then I can really emphasize on the meat and potatoes of that movement pattern from doing that, because I'm taking this out of the picture, okay? Your levator scapulae is the first muscle that's being utilized for the first 60 degrees of a lateral raise. There's no medial deltoid taking place in this up until here. Does that make sense? So if I take that same movement pattern, but I do a mechanical advantage lateral raise, now I'm really executing eccentric contraction, which is where the true meat and potatoes or the true tearing of the actual tissue takes place, but I'm not focusing on the scapular levator, right? I'm taking that out of the picture. So with that being said, although it doesn't necessarily make sense as far as the deadlift portion is concerned, I'm actually going to a closer angle. This here is easier to execute than this here, because this is out of my center mass. That make sense? So if I'm here, I'm gonna pull this back, and my verbiage on this is gonna be, I wanna break the handle. I wanna break the handle, I wanna create corkscrew setup at the shoulder, create that integrity before I start to lift. So this is where true global tension has to be there prior to going to the actual lift itself. So my checklist, I'm gonna pull this back so I can have some good tension on the band. I have my feet on the outside of the kettlebell. So if you look at the kettlebell, I want the kettlebell to be right underneath my hips. Okay? Not out here, but here. Locked in. I'm gonna bring my shoulders towards my back pocket, keep my chin towards my spine. I'm gonna lock everything in. The first initial portion of the deadlift is gonna be a leg press. I'm gonna leg press the weight up, and then from here, at kneecap level, that's where my hips come through. Boom. That's where I clinch, right?
Break it up.
It's two different movement patterns for a deadlift. It's not just you're not strictly just driving up, right? So here I'm dialed in, shoulder base towards the back pocket, chin towards the spine. I'm gonna drive the hips back, and then right now it's all hips up until here. At kneecap level, then I start bending the knees. Okay? But if you look closely, if you're really truly achieving a full depth, at around kneecap level, there's a little bit of external rotation taking place at the knees here, right? So locked in, hips, and the knees, boom, to create room for the hips, right? Locked in, tension, drive. Leg press the ground up, from here, hips, boom. Okay? So now there's complexity to the movement pattern, because now you're thinking, oh crap, now I have actual load, and I'm taking all these learning points that I took preliminarily before I added this portion into it. So a deadlift is much more steps than we actually give it credit for. And if I try to get my guy to do kettlebell swings before they execute a proper deadlift, I'm doing that person an injustice. Because a kettlebell swing is dynamic. You should have an understanding of what a proper deadlift is prior to going to a kettlebell swing, because a kettlebell swing, now you're working with different kind of forces. It's a swinging type action, right? Questions? Want to give this a try?
Yeah, my legs are kind of sore.
Give it a try, James. So, how am I going to coach my dude, right? So first and foremost, the first portion of the deadlift is what? When I'm actually lifting the weight up, what's the first portion? What was the verbiage that I used?
Press.
Leg press.
I'm gonna leg press the ground away from me, right? So here, I'm locked in, I'm gonna leg press straight up, and then at kneecap level, boom, then the hips come in, right? So when I'm leg pressing the weight up, or the ground away from me, I'm focusing on what, other than leg pressing? I want to keep these dialed in. I want to keep the oranges dialed in, because right now, I'm just like pressing the weight up. As I drive the hips through, that's a different portion of the deadlift, right? So bring it back. And then from here, does he have the kettlebell up front or right around? Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Underneath
Okay.
his hip.
So the reason why I'm able to bring it closer to my body, and this is actually a very good example here. If I bring it closer to my hips, or bring it even closer to about ankle level, now I have a better position to really execute this setup here. So break the handle as much as you can. As much as you can, break it. Bring the shoulders to the back pocket as much as you can. Engage. Squeeze these oranges as much as you can. Bring the hips up just a smidge. Good. Chin towards the spine. Good. From here, plenty of tension. Now drive the ground away slowly. Leg press it up. Up. Leg press it. More. And then hips. Drive it. Good. Now you see how the kettlebell's away from his body. I want the snug. Pull it back. Pull it back. Nice and snug. Okay? Now drive the hips back. Back. Knees. Good. The knees don't start coming into the picture until I've actually executed the hip pattern. hip pattern first, then knees take over. So plenty of engagement, yep. Leg press up slowly, get accustomed to it, and then ride the hips. Good, clinch. Hips back, 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 knees, knees, knees. Good, better. Lock it up. So from here, drive the hips up a little bit more. Hips up a little more. You're more in the squat stance right there. Right there, good. Okay, lock it up. To the top, good. You're still going into a hinge pattern. Don't confuse when I say bend the knees to make it into a squat pattern. Okay, you're still driving the hips back simultaneously. So drive the hips back. Back, 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 knees. Still drive the hips back. Good. So with him, he has less of an option. He has to go more into a squat pattern because there's a little bit more of a hamstring flexibility situation, right? Relax.
Hey, if they're tall, would you not tall? But if they're taller, would it be better for them to do a sumo deadlift? Because it's just a wider sense and they can get more.
My guys are like, I don't know, like 6 foot and up. 6 foot and up. I tend to veer more towards sumos. Okay. Sumo deadlifts first. Duke. Like my guy Duke. Like for example, with him, for some reason he actually finds conventional deadlifts easier than sumos.
Is there one that's easier than the other?
They're different.
Because you're like here, right?
Yeah. So think of it as sumo. You're not going to be able to lift as much because once again, it's the same analogy as this, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like
because you're really wide. But it also depends on the individual. If you have pretty sturdy hips and you're also fairly tight, a sumo deadlift may actually work better for you.
what?
You know? Yeah. That's what gives us job security, right? If you're continuously coaching and at the same time also really diving into being their internal monologue, that's what I'm doing. When I'm coaching you, I'm in your ear. I'm like the little mosquito in your ear, and it's like you hear it, right? And when you hear it, you start making those adjustments. And then what you do is you slowly just kind of pull your internal monologue or their internal monologue away, and you sit back. And what are they doing in their heads?
Hearing your voice.
They're hearing your voice. They're doing that checklist in their own head, right? It's the same thing as when you're putting your hands in between a doorway and you're driving out for a full minute, right? And you step away from the doorway. Same example, like your body's still thinking and you're still creating tension, right? Try that out next time when you find yourself in between a doorway. Press. Have you guys ever done that?
Yeah.
Press up against the doorway for a full minute, and then step out. It's the same thing, right? So with this here, right? What I like about the cues that I just gave you guys is I can make them universal to some extent, right? So if I'm doing a row, a seated row, what is the first thing that I'm going to do?
Load your feet on it.
Okay, so I'm going to grab the bar. You want to go into yanking the weight right away, or what do I want to do?
Leg press.
I'm going to leg press out first, right? So do I leg press out first, or do I set my shoulder integrity first?
Shoulder integrity.
So how would I do that?
Shoulders down and back.
Break the bar.
So break the bar.
Back pocket.
So that's dialed in, right?
Chin to spine.
Make some juice. I want some orange juice, baby. Condensed. Just like when you get your WIC card, you know, you gotta get it locked in. All right. And then push through the heels. All right. So from here, right? Do I want to be here? So back pocket, boom. So here's the beauty of this. The reason why this is so powerful is because I'm pulling the shoulders to my back pocket and I'm staying away from the cue that we all fall into, which is open your chest. Don't say open your chest anymore. Back pocket. And that opens your chest up. Boom. All right, so you got that back extension by bringing the shoulders to the back pocket. Corkscrew, chin towards the spine, and then what am I going to do when I pull? Do I say pull from the hands? Do I say pull from the shoulders? All right, so the lats is the end result. That's where I want to pull from, right? So what is a good cue that I can use when I pull? I'm going to pull from my elbows. So if I pull from the elbows, I'm taking the mindset of pulling from my hands away. And it's interesting how the mind thinks, because if I think of pulling from my hands, this is going to get out first, right? If I think of pulling from my elbows, I'm creating just enough tension to hold on to the weight, but the actual pull is coming from here.
So you create.
Yeah. So if I'm pulling from here, from the elbow, right, I'm going to think about more of the execution point, which is what you just talked about, the back end, right? So it's an interesting way to approach it. So locked in, breaking the bar, chin towards the spine, leg press the weight back, nice neutral spine, keep yourself upright, and then pull from the elbows, right to the back end, right? And I'm thinking about those shoulder blades tracking back towards my vertebra as I'm pulling from that pattern, right? Even at the end of the movement pattern, I'm still keeping those shoulders engaged from there. So I'm not falling into this position. I'm still keeping it dialed in. So when I do that, I'm tapping into the discipline of keeping those shoulders engaged when they should be engaged. Not every time, but some of the time when we fall into shoulder issues is because we did something when we were supposed to engage them and we disengage them. And you find yourself in a tweaked position. Unless you have that nice kyphotic situation going for you and you have an impingement going on, that's a different issue, right? But for the most part, that's one of those situations that happens. Make sense?